Before kingdoms rose, before prophets walked the earth in their glory, there lived a man with no throne, no wealth, no lineage, a man who was born into slavery, who owned nothing. Yet Allah placed his name in the Qur'an forever.
This is the story of Luqman, the man whose heart shone brighter than
whose wisdom bent the arrogance of kings, and whose words to his son became an immortal revelation. Tonight, you will hear the story of how an ordinary man became one of the greatest wise men Allah ever created. He enters the story the way dawn enters a silent night, softly, without noise, without armies or miracles. Just a man alone in the vastness of history. Yet Allah chose to carve his name into revelation. Before you hear anything about Luqman, you must first understand the weight of that honor. The Qur'an has carried the names of prophets, angels, and nations. But among all creation, only one ordinary man, neither king nor messenger, was granted a surah in his name. And that mystery hangs in the air like a question the heart feels before the mind understands. Who was this man? And what did Allah see in him? Long before scholars debated him, before storytellers tried to describe him, before the world even noticed him, Luqman lived in a world that forgot softness, a world of power and noise. Empires rose on greed, kings spoke with arrogance, and people measured worth by status and lineage. But somewhere far from the thrones of men, in a land where dust kissed the feet of shepherds, a humble servant walked the earth with a heart so awake that the heavens watched him. He was unseen by people, but never unseen by Allah. There were no miracles surrounding his birth, no signs in the sky, no trembling of mountains announcing his arrival. Instead, he came into a world that overlooked him. A man with no wealth to his name, no tribe to defend him, no reputation to carry him. Yet in his chest lived something rarer than gold, something even prophets recognized from afar. A heart that never lied, and a mind that never slept. Before Luqman ever spoke a word of wisdom, before he rose from slavery to honor, before he sat his son down to pour pearls into his young heart, Allah had already chosen him. Not as a prophet, not as a ruler, but as a sign that greatness is not inherited, it is earned. That honor is not found in titles, but in sincerity. And that sometimes the most powerful message does not come through miracles, but through the quiet strength of a righteous life. And so, the Qur'an opens Surah Luqman, not with his lineage, not with his appearance, but with a declaration from the Lord of the worlds himself. We gave Luqman wisdom. It was not knowledge learned from books. It was not a status granted by men. It was the kind of wisdom that purifies everything it touches. The kind of wisdom that turns a slave into a sage and a forgotten man into an eternal lesson. The kind of wisdom that made the angels record his name beside prophets, not because he was one of them, but because his heart carried something astonishing: gratitude, humility, clarity, and a truthfulness that made even kings lower their voices. You may ask, why him? Why did Allah elevate this man above the noise of his age? Why did he choose his words, his simple words to his son, to be preserved until the end of time? The answer is as quiet as the man himself. Because Luqman lived unseen by people, but fully seen by Allah. Because while the world admired power, Luqman perfected sincerity. Because while others chased the world, Luqman chased wisdom. And when Allah loves a servant, he writes his name not in stone, but in revelation. And that is why we begin here, with the story of a man who owned nothing but whose heart was so full that Allah made his name immortal. He came from a place the world did not look toward, a land of heat, dust, and quiet resilience somewhere deep in Africa. No royal cradle awaited him, no prophecy surrounded his childhood, no scholars lined up to record his birth. He entered life with nothing but the skin on his body and the breath in his chest. dark-skinned, short in stature, with thick lips and cracked feet from long walks under burning suns. This was Luqman as people saw him, a man whose appearance invited no awe, whose presence stirred no whispers of greatness. He looked like someone whose life had been forgotten. People judged him the way the world always judges, by what is visible. And what they saw was a young man with no lineage that mattered, no wealth that protected him, no strength that intimidated others. In the marketplaces, he blended with the servants, the herdsmen, the laborers who bent their backs to survive another day. In gatherings, no seat was saved for him. He was the type of man people looked past, not at, a face among faces, a shadow among shadows. Then came the chains. At some point in his youth, fate, or rather divine design, delivered him into slavery. His hands were bound not to punish him, but to shape him. He was sold like property, commanded like an object, worked like an animal beneath the sun. Every day was a test of patience. Every night was a test of faith. A lesser heart would have crumbled under humiliation. But Luqman carried something inside him that hardship could not erode. A calmness, a quiet awareness, a steady gaze that saw beyond the wounds of the present moment. He did not curse the sky. He did not resent his captives. He did not drown in bitterness. Instead, he learned the art of silence. He observed people closely, their cruelty and their kindness, their lies and their truths. He saw how arrogance made even the strong weak, and how gratitude made even the weak powerful. Slowly, with each painful day, his soul sharpened. Slavery did not break him, it purified him. Hardship did not blind him, it opened his inner sight. People saw a slave. Allah saw a servant whose heart was already kneeling. And while others only noticed the limitations of his body, Allah was watching the radiance of his soul, that deep sincerity, that inner cleanliness, that patience which never trembled. The world mistook his humility for weakness, but in the unseen realm, angels noted every tear he swallowed, every insult he endured, every silent prayer buried in his chest. He was not expected to become anything, not a leader, not a scholar, not a man whose words would outlive centuries. But this is the way Allah writes his finest stories, beginning with those the world underestimates, the ones who rise not because of power, but because of purity, the ones who are not sculpted by wealth or respect, but by trials that carve wisdom into their bones. Luqman's greatness did not start when he was freed, or when he advised his son, or when Allah immortalized him in the Qur'an. It began here, in the silent, unseen endurance of a young man the world overlooked and Allah chose. The day that changed everything did not arrive with thunder or miracles. It came quietly, like most divine tests do, wrapped in something ordinary. Luqman's master called for him, his voice carrying the tone of command that slaves knew too well. In his hands, he placed a simple order, one that seemed like routine. Slaughter a sheep and bring me the best 2 parts of it. No explanation, no hint, just a command. Luqman obeyed without hesitation. He took the animal aside, whispered a prayer only Allah heard, and carried out the task with steady hands. When he returned, he placed before his master 2 pieces of flesh, the heart and the tongue. A flicker of surprise crossed the man's face, but he said nothing. Not yet. The next day, the test returned, this time sharper, heavier, more revealing. Slaughter another sheep, the master said, and bring me the worst 2 parts of it. Again, Luqman obeyed. Again, he returned with only the heart and the tongue. Now the master stared at him, no longer hiding his curiosity. Yesterday you told me these were the best parts, he said. Today you claim they are the worst. How can the same 2 things be both the finest and the most corrupt? Luqman lowered his gaze, not out of fear but out of respect. Then with a calmness carved from years of hardship, he answered the answer that would free him, elevate him, and echo across centuries. Master, there is nothing better than the heart and the tongue when they are pure. and there is nothing worse than the heart and the tongue when they are corrupt. If they are righteous, the whole body becomes righteous, and if they are spoiled, everything becomes spoiled with them. For a moment, the world seemed to still. It was as if the air around them absorbed his words, carried them, honored them, because what he said was not cleverness. It was truth wrapped in simplicity. The kind of truth only a man who has lived through silence and pain could understand. The heart and the tongue, the two things no human can hide, the two things that betray or protect a soul. If they shine, a person becomes light. If they darken, a person becomes darkness. The master looked at him differently now, as if seeing him for the first time. He realized this man, this slave whom the world dismissed, carried a wisdom deeper than the scholars he admired, sharper than the judges he consulted. In that moment, the chains around Luqman were no longer chains. They were proof that Allah sometimes hides diamonds inside dust. The master understood this man was never meant to remain a servant of people. He was meant to be a servant of Allah alone. And so the test, a test of flesh and humility, became the key to Luqman's freedom. A freedom not granted out of pity, but out of awe. The doors that the world had closed on him for years opened in a single breath simply because his heart and his tongue spoke truth. That was the turning point. The moment the world shifted its gaze, a slave became a sage, a forgotten man became unforgettable. And the heart of Luqman, the heart that chose purity over resentment, rose to a place only Allah could raise it. After his freedom, Luqman walked away from the life that had once chained him, carrying nothing but a heart polished by patience and a mind sharpened by reflection. His journey led him north, across deserts and valleys, until the land of Palestine opened before him, a place where prophets walked, where revelation breathed, where the air itself seemed to hold the weight of divine truth. It was there that he first encountered Dawood, a prophet whose presence carried both authority and gentleness, a leader chosen by Allah to judge between people with justice. Luqman watched him quietly at first. He observed the way Dawood listened to disputes, not just with his ears, but with his heart. He noticed how the prophet would pause before speaking, letting silence clean the air, letting truth rise on its own. Luqman learned that judgment was not about cleverness, but clarity. Not about winning, but about seeing into the roots of a matter. And something inside him resonated deeply with Dawood's approach. After all, Luqman had already spent years studying humanity from behind the veil of servitude. Now he was learning how to translate those observations into wisdom that could heal rather than divide. Day after day, Luqman stayed by his side, not as a companion, not as a scholar, but as a humble seeker who understood the value of stillness. His silence was not emptiness, it was concentration. His questions were not many, they were precise. And Dawood recognized in him what few men possessed, a mind that understood without being told, and a heart that softened before it was judged. It was during this time that scholars later began to debate, was Luqman himself a prophet or simply a righteous servant? Some argued that a man of such wisdom, such insight, such purity, a man mentioned by name in the Qur'an, must have been a prophet. Others insisted he was not, pointing to the verse, "We gave Luqman wisdom, not revelation." Prophethood is a mantle given to a chosen few. Wisdom is a gift poured into the hearts of those who purify themselves. And this distinction is what made Luqman extraordinary. For if he had been a prophet, his story would belong to the ranks of messengers guided by revelation, protected by divine authority. But Allah wanted something else, to show the world that greatness is not only for prophets. That spiritual elevation is not reserved for those chosen through revelation, but also those who choose Allah through sincerity. By giving him wisdom, not prophethood, Allah made Luqman a mirror for every ordinary believer, a reminder that closeness to Allah is not limited by lineage or status or miracles or signs. A heart can rise simply by being truthful, grateful, and awake. And so, Luqman remained beside Dawood, learning not through scripture, but through witnessing how a prophet lived. He learned how silence can protect a person from countless regrets. He learned how judgment belongs first to the self before others. He learned how humility opens doors that pride keeps shut, and through this companionship his wisdom deepened until it was no longer merely learned. It became part of his being. People came to him seeking advice they once sought from kings. They trusted his words because he spoke little, and every word he spoke felt weighed by heaven. He was not a prophet, but he walked with the dignity of one. He was not given revelation, but he carried the reflection of revelation in his heart. Allah raised him without title, without miracles, without scripture, so that humanity would understand that sometimes the greatest light does not descend. It grows quietly within a human soul. He waited until the world grew quiet, until the sun softened its light and the shadows stretched long across the ground. Only then did he call his son to sit beside him, not with authority, but with tenderness. There is a moment in every father's life when his heart feels heavier than his words, and this was Luqman's moment. His eyes, calm and deepened by years of reflection, settled on the young face before him. He did not raise his voice. He did not decorate his speech. He spoke the way wise men breathed, slowly, intentionally, each word meant to land gently on the heart. "My beloved son," he said, and the world around them seemed to lean closer. "The first thing I fear for you is the one thing Allah never forgives. Do not associate anything with him. Everything in this life becomes light or darkness based on that one truth. Shirk destroys a person from the inside long before the world sees the ruin." He placed a hand on his son's shoulder, not to strengthen his speech, but to soften it. "And be grateful," he continued, "to Allah who formed you, to the one who guided you, to the one who never leaves you even when people do. Gratitude will build a palace in your heart, one no storm can enter." His voice deepened with quiet emotion as he spoke of parents, the ones who sacrifice silently, who age slowly while raising their children. "Honor them," Luqman whispered. "Your mother carried you in weakness upon weakness. Your father protected you before you even understood what danger was. Treat them gently, even when they do not treat you gently. Such mercy returns to you in ways you will not expect." Then he leaned closer, lowering his voice as if letting his son in on a secret known only to those who watch the world with spiritual clarity. "My son, even if something is the size of a mustard seed, hidden deep inside a rock or lost in the heavens or buried anywhere in the earth, Allah will bring it forth. Nothing escapes him, not your kindness, not your sins. Walk through life with this awareness, for it is the key to integrity." He reminded him of prayer, the pillar that shapes a believer's hours and purifies their days. "Do not let your prayers fall from your hands," he said. "Hold them, protect them, stand before Allah even when your soul feels tired. Prayer is the rope that keeps a heart from falling." Then came the responsibility that belongs to every believer. "Invite people to what is good," he said softly. "Warn them against what is harmful, even if they dislike you for it, even if they hurt you for it. You were not created to be silent in the face of wrong." He paused, letting his son absorb the weight of it. "And when hardship strikes you, as it surely will, be patient. Patience is a bridge between today's pain and tomorrow's mercy." He shifted, letting the breeze carry his next words. "Do not walk the earth with pride," he said. "Do not lift your chin as if you created your own breath. The earth you step on will swallow kings and beggars alike. Walk gently, for gentleness is a sign of strength." Then, as the final light of day dimmed, he gave the last advice, one that revealed more about human character than many ever realize. "Lower your voice," he told him, smiling faintly. "Do not shout to be heard. The loudest voices are often the emptiest. Even the donkey brays loudly, not out of strength but out of ugliness. Let your words be measured, let your tone be soft. Wisdom does not need volume." Luqman did not lecture, he planted seeds. He did not speak to impress, he spoke to guide. And as his son listened, the sky moved above them, the wind circled them, and the angels recorded every word. Knowing these simple, tender instructions would outlive civilizations, preserved forever in the book sent for all time. Even after freedom lifted from his shoulders and honor settled into his life, Luqman walked the earth with the same quiet step he had since the days of his servitude. Nothing about him announced greatness. He did not dress like the learned, nor speak like the eloquent, nor carry himself like the powerful. His greatness lived in the places people ignore, the stillness between his breaths, the gentleness in his gaze, the way he listened more than he spoke. He was a man who thought deeply, spoke carefully, and lived softly. Those who sat with him would often forget he was in the room until he offered a single sentence that seemed to open a window in their chest and let the light in. He was never seen raising his voice, never seen arguing, never caught mocking or belittling anyone. If someone insulted him, he answered with silence. If someone asked him a question, he answered with words so measured they felt like they were chosen from heaven. People often mistook his quietness for shyness, but those who understood him knew it was something far more powerful, a heart at peace with its Lord, unshaken by the noise of the world. And yet, as word of his wisdom spread, as men and women traveled from distant lands to seek his counsel, as families brought their disputes to him the way they once brought them to prophets, Luqman remained exactly as he had always been. There was no shift in his posture, no rise in his tone, no change in the way he carried himself. He sat on the ground when he judged. He walked home alone afterward, even when the leaders of Bani Israel offered him a place among their respected judges. He accepted not with pride, but with fear. Fear of failing Allah, fear of judgment, fear of being unjust, even by a hair's width. He remembered the chains. He remembered the humiliation. He remembered the nights he slept on cold stone floors and whispered prayers that no one heard. And because he remembered, arrogance never found an entrance into his heart. The position did not tempt him. Praise did not intoxicate him. Even admiration felt heavy on his soul, as though he might be held accountable for every compliment he allowed to settle too deeply. People would ask him, "How did you rise from slavery to wisdom, from herding sheep to judging nations?" And he would simply say, "By holding my tongue, guarding my heart, and leaving what does not concern me." He never claimed brilliance, never claimed superiority, never claimed that wisdom was something he earned. He knew it was a gift that could be taken in an instant if he ever thought it belonged to him. Luqman walked through life with the rarest form of strength, humility. Even when crowds gathered around him, he did not see himself above them. He saw them as fellow travelers on a short journey, each carrying their own burdens, each trying to navigate the world without losing their souls. He kept his head low, not because he feared people, but because he feared disappointing the one who raised him from slave to sage, from unknown to immortalized in the Qur'an. And yet not once did pride enter the heart of Luqman. That was his miracle, not a staff that split the sea, not a hand that shone with light, not a prayer that raised the dead. His miracle was the purity of a soul that the world tried to break, and a humility so deep that even honor could not shake it. As the years folded into one another and Luqman's life neared its final twilight, there was no spectacle, no grand farewell, no heavenly sign marking his departure. Wise men often leave the world the same way they lived in it, quietly. The narrations surrounding his death drift like scattered leaves across history, each one pointing to a different place where people claimed he rested. Some said he was buried in Bethlehem, near the land where prophets walked and revelation descended. Others believed his grave lay somewhere in Palestine, where he once sat beside Dawood and learned the secrets of judgment. Still others insisted he was carried to Yemen, buried among ancient tribes who honored his name. And a few spoke of a grave in the mountains of Saudi Arabia, in a village whose stones remember stories the world has forgotten. But none of these claims stand with certainty. No scholar can point to a stone and say, "Here he lies." No historian can trace his final footsteps with absolute clarity. And perhaps that is exactly as it was meant to be. Allah hid his resting place the way he hides his closest friends, not out of secrecy, but out of protection. For Luqman's value was never tied to the dust he returned to. His greatness was not in where he was laid down, but in how he stood while alive. Think of it, a man once sold in a marketplace, a man whose skin and stature made others look down on him. A man who owned nothing now has a legacy people cross oceans to study. Scholars argue over where he died, but no one argues over how he lived. His words became scripture. His advice became revelation. His heart became a symbol of what sincerity can achieve. The world remembers his voice, not his bones. And that is the truth Allah wanted humanity to understand. Graves are for bodies, legacies are for souls. Some people are remembered because of the dust they leave behind. Others are remembered because of the light they carried within. Luqman was the latter. Whether he rests beneath a Palestinian olive tree, or in Yemen's ancient highlands, or near the birthplace of Isa, or in the mountains of Arabia, it changes nothing. The earth beneath him is honored simply for holding a man whose heart once held wisdom shaped by heaven. Greatness is not measured by the stones above your grave, nor by the crowds who visit it. It is measured by the impact of your character, the truth of your words, and the sincerity of your deeds. Luqman left behind no palace, no army, no wealth, no empire. Yet his legacy outlived kings, survived civilizations, and travels the world every time a believer recites his story from the Qur'an. People spend lifetimes chasing monuments that crumble. Luqman sought only to please Allah, and Allah wrote his name into eternity. That is the kind of legacy no soil, no distance, no forgotten grave can ever erase. Time moves like a tide, swallowing everything that once felt unshakable. Empires that were built on mountains of gold crumbled into sand. Kings who commanded armies with a flick of their hand now rest beneath the same earth they once walked with arrogance. Palaces once filled with silk, music, and pride are nothing but ruins the tourists wander through, wondering who lived there and why their names no longer matter. But the words of a man who once herded sheep still breathe in the Qur'an. That is the quiet miracle of Luqman's story. He had no throne, yet his voice sits beside revelation. He owned no wealth, yet his wisdom enriched hearts across centuries. He led no armies, yet his teachings conquered forgetfulness. He lived without power, without status, without the admiration of his age, but he lived with sincerity. And sincerity is a ladder Allah reserves for the rarest souls. Generation after generation, children learn his advice before they learn the histories of kings. Scholars quote him, imams teach him, and believers recite his words in prayer halls and classrooms and quiet rooms, where fathers speak softly to their sons. His teachings have crossed deserts, oceans, and continents, not carried by armies, but carried by hearts. And this is the truth his life whispers to anyone who pauses long enough to hear it. A person does not need a crown to shape the world. He needs a heart connected to the one who shapes destinies. Luqman's story is not about rise and fall. It is about rise and remain. Empires rose and vanished. Kings lived and died. Civilizations flourished and disappeared into the dust of time. But his name stands untouched in the book recited until the last day, not because he was powerful, but because he was pure. And in that purity lies a message for every soul wandering through life, wondering if they matter, if their efforts count, if their quiet goodness is seen by anyone at all. Allah sees everything. Allah forgets nothing. Allah raises whom He wills, so the story ends where all true stories begin, with the heart that fears Him, the heart that trusts Him, the heart that seeks Him in silence. That was Luqman's secret, his treasure. The lantern he carried through a world that tried to dim him. Allah does not look at forms, colors, or wealth. He looks at hearts. And sometimes the people the world steps on are the ones Allah raises above nations. Fade,